Jesus just told his disciples he's going to be betrayed, mocked, and killed. How did James and John respond? By asking, "Can we sit on your right and left when you take power?" This moment exposes the deepest tension in the Gospel of Mark. While Jesus is moving toward the cross, two of his closest followers are grasping for thrones. We're studying Mark 10:35-40. Let's read verse 35 from the English Standard Version. "And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, 'Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you.'" This is the sort of statement most parents have heard. Please agree to our request, whatever it may be, before you know what it is. Earlier in the chapter, Jesus touted the merits of receiving the kingdom in a childlike way. But the statement of James and John doesn't seem childlike. It seems childish and immature. What sane person would agree to honor a request without hearing it first? That is a rhetorical question. Look at Jesus' response in verse 36. "And he said to them, 'What do you want me to do for you?'" Notice he didn't say yes or no. He didn't point out the childish nature of their statement. He asked what it was that they wanted. Look at verse 37. "And they said to him, 'Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory.'" What are they seeking? Seats. Where? On the right and left sides of Jesus, who would presumably have his own seat or throne. In what context? In his glory. Let's talk about this glory. First, in the context of Mark's Gospel, the passage that immediately preceded this was Jesus describing in detail that when they get to Jerusalem, he will be betrayed, mistreated, condemned, and killed. And after 3 days, he would rise. The majority of what he described most certainly did not sound like glory. But, also in this context, Jesus called himself the Son of Man, a messianic title, and he's marching to Jerusalem. James and John may be swept up in their own expectations of Jesus establishing a messianic kingdom. Another thing to consider is that James and John are two of the three witnesses to the transfiguration of Jesus. They have actually seen Jesus in glory, and when they did, they saw Moses and Elijah on his right and left. So they have some basis for this vision of a glorified Jesus with important figures by his side. So what do we know for certain? James and John are seeking high positions alongside Jesus in his glory at some point in the future. What we do not know is if this is pure opportunism, and they completely missed what Jesus had just told them in verses 33 and 34. Or if they didn't miss it, and were looking beyond the resurrection, assuming that Jesus would establish an earthly kingdom after that. How did Jesus respond to their request? Look at verse 38. Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" He opened with a statement, "You do not know what you are asking." What does that mean? They want to be at his right and left sides in glory. They want to be closest to him, to be the number 2 and number 3 figures in the kingdom. In chapter 9, they argued about who was the greatest, and now they are maneuvering for positions of greatness. But they do not understand that being second and third to Jesus doesn't mean greatness and glory, at least not as they understand greatness. Now he asks them a question. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? The cup is a reference to the messianic suffering foretold in Psalm 75:8 and Isaiah 51:17. Can they drink in the suffering he will drink in Jerusalem? And the word baptism literally means immersion. So when he asks if they can be baptized with the same baptism as him, he is asking if they can be immersed in what awaits him in Jerusalem, the things he described in verses 33 and 34. The betrayal, condemnation, mocking, spitting, beating, and killing. Are they ready for suffering, or are they obsessed with thrones? Look at the first part of verse 39. And they said to him, "We are able." They certainly sound sincere. but I would suggest that their answer betrays a naivete. You cannot know what you are able to do if you have no real frame of reference for that thing. They have heard Jesus describe it, but the very fact that they immediately started jockeying for positions makes me think they didn't fully hear what he was saying. But be careful what you wish for. Look at the rest of verse 39 and verse 40. And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." Jesus makes an indicative statement. The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. You will, in fact, experience these things. The Jesus who foretold his own suffering, death, and resurrection now tells James and John that they too would suffer, and history confirms that he was correct. But then he tells them that the seats they requested are not his to give out, because those positions have been prepared for others. For whom? Mark doesn't tell us, but remember, at the Transfiguration, Jesus had Moses, the law, and Elijah, the prophets, at his right and left sides. Is it them? Is it someone else? Let me know what you think in the comments. So what is the big lesson of this passage? Discipleship is about following Jesus, patterning oneself after him, and becoming more and more like him. James and John saw Jesus in glory and anticipated a glorious future. They wanted in on the glory, but Jesus told them that they would be immersed in suffering, like their master. They asked Jesus for glorious positions, but he told them they didn't know what they were asking. How about us? What do we want from Jesus? And are those wants consistent with following him as disciples? Do we know what we're asking? Next time, the other 10 apostles hear about James and John's request, and they're not impressed. Thanks for studying with me. Are you finding value in these videos? Let me know in the comments.